We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by FanDuel. 4 trending wide receivers for NFL Week 7, players that everyone is talking about, and how we can use those narratives to find an edge at one of the most important positions in fantasy football. There's definitely no one out there that I would rather talk wide receivers with than our next guest. You guys know him from Yahoo Sports, Reception Perception, and his new YouTube channel, which you can find in the description of this video. Matt Harmon, how we doing, man?
I'm doing good. Week 7, we're right around sort of the target is kind of moving here, whether you're playing in redraft leagues, whether you're just looking at the longer season as a whole, but we're kind of right around the middle point of the season. And we know, more identities about these teams and stuff like that. So I think this is a great time to kind of, especially some of the players we're talking about today, man, it's exciting to kind of take a look at what they've done so far, how that fits into our expectations about the players coming into the year, and then our expectations for the rest of the year.
Yeah, Sig always talks about how we have like that initial reveal in like week 1, week 2, and then there's also like a second reveal of like week 5, yes, week 6, because we finally have like 4 or 5 weeks of data to kind of look into like how these teams, I guess how we were wrong in some ways, right? Like some of these teams are like, oh, they're going to be one of the most pass heavy teams in the league. Oh yeah, not so fast. So we'll definitely keep working through that. That's what makes this fun. Go ahead.
It's great that you brought up Bloom too, because
I love that
guy. Of course, we love Saban Bloom, but like I quoted him in our survival kit video for Yahoo Sports this week, and basically saying like we were talking about which players the people got wrong, and he actually says too, you can be right and wrong about one player in one season.
Definitely.
Like half the year you were right, half the year you were wrong, and I think that is very fitting for some of our guys that we're talking about today.
Yeah, so let's just kick it right off with a guy that I don't know if we can really take the L on just yet. One of the more talented guys in the league, a guy that was being drafted in, the top 5 at the wide receiver position. Calvin Ridley, this week specifically, Harmon, he's 7,300 on FanDuel at Miami. So we're going to have to kind of work through, I guess only if you look at just the data, only Devontae Adams and Brandon Cooks have a higher weighted opportunity rating over the last 4 weeks. So, it seems like there's still good things coming for Calvin Ridley. Is it like a matter of time at this point before he breaks out?
Yeah, I feel like it is a matter of time before he has one of those huge games, because you just look at him. You mentioned it. The opportunity has been there. I believe he's 9th in the NFL in air yards per game. So even the verticality that has not been present for the Falcons offense, they have at least been trying to get it to Calvin Ridley. And, obviously it's just like we haven't seen the guy for 2 weeks now because he has the personal matter that he missed the London game. Obviously the Falcons were on their bye this week. They get the Dolphins coming off their London game with no bye this week, and which is funny because apparently the Dolphins chose to not take a bye after the London game, which I guess you could quibble with, but most of the choices the Dolphins have made have been very poor. That's why they're rebuild.
I can't even wrap my head around that. Like if they're saying like, yeah, you can take your bye after you just flew across the pond, like why would you just like, nah, we're good, we'll play.
Well, look at all their draft picks, man. They build this arsenal of draft picks, rebuilding, kind of doing a full teardown type of thing. And basically every bet that the Dolphins, we don't need to turn this into the Dolphins hour, but every bet that the Dolphins have made has been wrong. They tried to turn around this defense into a heavy man coverage unit. This defense is not good. They try to rebuild the offensive line. That was their number one priority. That offensive line rebuild has been a complete failure. They're one of the worst pass blocking and worst run blocking offensive lines in the entire NFL. And apparently they hate their quarterback that they took in the top 5 less than 2 years ago. So, right. It's a nightmare there in Miami. Yeah, are their choices not very good? And you look at Calvin Ridley too, coming into this game. I do think this is sort of the start of his, I think it was kind of overblown that he was sort of struggling to start this year. I think the entire offense was just struggling to gel, but I think the Falcons offense, if you kind of squint at it, has really started to find itself. Kyle Pitts has his breakout game in London. Matt Ryan is starting to push the ball down the field a little bit more. I really like this game overall for fantasy, and you just look at the Dolphins defense. Like I mentioned, it's not a very good unit overall, but they're banged up at the cornerback spot. Both Byron Jones and Xavier Howard missed last week's game. Also, those are just heavy coverage corners that we know via reception perception that Calvin Ridley is one of the best man coverage beaters over the last 3 years. I think this just lines up for him to have an elite wide receiver game. Overall, really like this script.
Yeah, this is a game that, we're going to continue to kind of talk about as this segment goes on. But Harmon, did you ever think that we would see your boy CPAT more expensive than Calvin Ridley? He's $700 more. I guess the only argument that I can really, there's a couple of things that are obviously great about his usage. Like they're using him around the goal line. If he's out there, he's being targeted. But also, you can play him as a wide receiver. You can play him as a running back. But he's $8K. But having that nice little 7 to 10 rush floor from a wide receiver, that's kind of nice. I don't know. I'm kind of coming around to the CPAT thing a little bit, but I mean, I would imagine that some of the stuff with Kyle Pitts, at least the volume last week, was because Calvin Ridley wasn't playing, right? So I guess how do we wrap our heads around, I guess, those three guys, because their prices, like it's not easy to get to them.
No, it's not easy to get to them. I do think that from a price standpoint, Calvin Ridley does remain the most attractive one of the three, from a usage standpoint as well. And, especially when you look at Cordell Patterson, though, like Arthur Smith has been, the returns have been disappointing so far with him as the head coach there in Atlanta, obviously. But he really has been the one to kind of crack the CPAT code. Like teams have, old Matt Nagy is like still still just twisted about the fact that he couldn't be the one to do it. He tried to do, this sort of hybrid role with Cordero Patterson, didn't really work out. He had a stint, did Cordero Patterson with the Patriots as a running back. But look, this offense straight up needs juice. Like we've been saying it all year, but their number two receiver, like even if Russell Gage has been injured, that was never, ever, ever going to cut it.
Correct.
Like Russell Gage is not a starting receiver in this league. Like they're really lacking there. So I think this offense can be a very highly concentrated unit from a passing game standpoint between Patterson, Pitts, and Ridley. But I also don't mind like Mike Davis too. The usage has been good for Mike Davis. The fantasy results have not been there because they're one of the worst run blocking teams in the NFL. But I think those four guys can create a pretty decent offensive core. I really do like Cordero Patterson's usage. I don't know if I'm ever going to have the stones to click him in like a non-single game DFS format because the floor is decent. But
The
if he
floor is
doesn't score
20
a bunch of
snaps.
touchdowns-
Like that, like, it comes
Right.
down to it, right?
Yeah,
Like that's so rough at 8K.
exactly.
Yeah. But I mean,
Exactly. That at that price point, that's pretty bad to deal with.
it's not even close to the same player or anything like that. But like I get really burnt for a while on these like super high efficiency guys. Like Tyreek Hill, I was just battling that for what felt like at least a full year, and then like he was just getting there on basically no snaps, but the usage was great. So I don't know. I'm trying to stay open minded. I do like this game a lot. It's a week where we don't have as many like super attractive situations from a DFS perspective. Only 10 games, the buys, the London games, all of those things. So another guy that we're going to talk about in this game, Harmon, is on the other side of this game, Jalen Waddle. What's crazy is that he goes absolutely nuts in London, 13 targets, 10 catches for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns, and his price has stayed the same. He's 5,900. So it just seems like an easy bring back on the other side of this one. Even if you don't want to fully stack up this game, mini stacks seem like they might be super appealing. Waddle on the other side is another guy you want to talk about.
Yeah, and I mean it's a little frustrating when you look at Jalen Waddle and he's averaging, less than 10 yards per catch, right? His A dot is super low. Although it is worth noting, his A dot with Jacoby Brissett is sub 4 yards. Dwayne McFarland from Pro Football Focus pointed this out this week. He's at like a 9 A dot, which is, I mean, that's still too low. You'd like it to be above 10, right? But overall, like he is around a 9 A dot with Tua back there. And that's a bit better than the Jacoby Brissett show. I know we don't love Tua in terms of like a downfield passer, but again, behind this offensive line with Jacoby Brissett, who's never been a vertical passer at all, he is kind of a dink and dunk guy, gets the ball out quick. It was just never going to happen like downfield for Jalen Waddle. I at least like watching that game last week. The Jags and the Dolphins, I liked the way that Tua attacked the intermediate area of the field. Again, he's never going to be like old Ryan Fitzpatrick was for the Dolphins, really slinging it vertically or whatever. But I do think Tua can at least attack that short, intermediate, middle area of the field. And that really is where Jalen Waddle is living right now. And the thing with Waddle too, he's top 8 in the NFL in catches. Like the opportunity is all there. As I mentioned, the A dot is not quite as high as you want it, but man, this guy is a legit talent. I think he's probably best as a slot receiver, so I don't mind the short A dot usage, but he also has serious speed, man. I wasn't in on the Tyreek Hill comparisons, but he was definitely a big time explosive guy in college football. Among the guys that I charted incoming prospects for reception perception this past year, Jalen Waddle led all players with an 80% success rate versus man coverage. Better than Devontae Smith, better than a lot of guys that were drafted really high. And some of that last year was because it was a smaller sample. He got hurt and everything. But I think that shows he is a legit full field talent. At some point, even if it's on a catch and run type of situation, Waddle is going to take all of this opportunity and create that into big plays because he's just that good of a talent. And I think the volume's following him because he's that good of a talent. The price is attractive this week. The matchup is incredibly attractive against this Falcons defense that is still overall aggressive from the way they try to pressure the quarterback, but we know their personnel is not good. This does look like a pretty good week to chase Jalen Waddle's theoretical upside, even if the A dot isn't quite where we want it.
Yeah, there's just so much to like about this game. Like even on the Falcons side, they're operating at the seventh fastest neutral pace. So like they're a top 10 team in terms of passing rate. So there should be a lot of plays to go around. And then this Dolphins secondary is banged up. They're facing a ton of passing attempts on the other side. So it seems like one of those games that just by default should rack up a ton of opportunities for some of these guys. And if there is going to be more of a condensed target share on the Miami side, it's at least intriguing. So definitely want to remind everyone that the show is on all major I can't even talk, is on all major podcast platforms. I always forget to mention that because I think that most people come to YouTube to watch this, but if you're working out, doing something like that, definitely check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of that good stuff. Harmon, the next guy, I guess maybe we got a little bit bailed out because A.J. Brown, he's 7K this week against Kansas City, and he's still a top 15 guy in terms of weighted opportunity rating, all of those things that we want. We just have to keep this guy away from Chipotle, right? Because if we can keep him healthy and on the field and feeling good, I mean, it's just that explosion spot against Kansas City now this week, a week late maybe, but at least now he's on the main slate, right? Am I overthinking this?
No, I don't think you're overthinking it at all, man. I mean, was there ever a better moment to say like, wow, NFL players just like us? Like who hasn't
Yep.
had a bad run in with Chipotle or one of those other like fast casual Mexican style places? You know, I mean, I'll raise my hand for Qdoba.
There you go.
That's always been my vice in terms of the situation that AJ Brown found himself in on Monday night. Let's just put it that way. I don't go to that particular spot anymore. So sorry for
Qdoba
the
guy,
brand
man. You
sponsor.
sure you want to admit that?
No, I'm saying that's the one that's giving me the most
Oh,
trouble.
okay.
That's the
Got
one
it.
that's
Got it.
in terms of what AJ Brown dealt with. That's the one that's given me that type of situation. So I do not go there anymore. Let's just put it that way.
Fair enough.
I don't even know if they have them out here in California. I mean, if you live in California and you're going to like one of those spots, not like a local truck or something, and you're obviously rolling the dice there too. But if you're not going to a local truck, you're missing out, man. That's the deal. And I think you're going to be missing out if you don't play AJ Brown this week. You mentioned the Kansas City matchup. Great spot there. We know they're 32nd in pass defense, DVOA, man. Like, I mean, I love this setup for AJ Brown. There's all this talk about the snap count or whatever. He kind of threw some cold water on that, saying that he just doesn't know that he's going to be ready to rock in terms of like everything that he's capable of in week 10, but until week 10. But we saw last week, man, he ran the most routes on the team, 26 routes on 31 Ryan Tannehill dropbacks. Like from a pass snap standpoint, we don't have any concerns. I don't really care if he's out there blocking for Derrick Henry on rushing plays. Whatever. That's not going to give me fantasy points anyway. So I don't have any question about AJ Brown. I also like that they got him around 51% of his snaps from the slot last week. That's pretty encouraging too, in terms of that's how they started to move the ball against the Bills on Monday night, man. They just sort of started getting AJ Brown on those crossers, and we know that is his most dangerous play. Like he can break big plays on that. He can obviously be a guy that like racks up 90 yards in one half, just matriculating the offense down the field as he did last week against the Bills. I think we're all the way back in on AJ Brown. I mean, it's been a bad break so far, but I think it's mostly just been that bad luck, right? Like he comes in with this knee injury, drops a bunch of passes in week 2, has a hamstring injury, which I don't even know if that is related to the prior knee injury. And then obviously he has the Chipotle situation on Monday night. I know a fair few people that had to bench, like in my Discord, that were worried about playing AJ Brown. I'm like, I don't know if you can risk it or whatever, because we didn't know what the deal was. But now I think AJ Brown back on the main slate in a good matchup. We're backed up to juicing up expectations for this guy. No question in my mind.
Love it, man. It could be on my end. It looks like the quality's dropped a little bit, but the audio is good. And Harmon, the one thing that is still okay is in the chat, they're letting us know that even though it's blurry, your beard's still looking crisp, man. That's the important thing. So we're gonna get you out of here shortly, but let's talk quickly about Brandon Cooks. He's still 6,500 on FanDuel. We mentioned it before. Only Devontae Adams has a higher weighted opportunity over the last 4 weeks, and then I guess we can kind of throw Cordero Patterson into there as like kind of one of those guys that maybe the outlier, but specifically for Cooks at 6,500, it still seems like a really nice price tag for a guy with this type of volume, right?
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, the weighted opportunities there, the air yard shares there, everything for Brandon Cooks. And we know he's just their best player. Obviously, like some of these goofball receivers like Chris Moore or Chris Conley, all those guys could pop up for big games at some point. But I think Brandon Cooks is still a very reliable piece in what should be a high scoring game going back and forth with the Arizona Cardinals. It's just tough. Like, what Davis Mills are we going to get? That's my biggest concern every week with playing Brandon Cooks, because we've seen kind of an every week situation with the Davis Mills Texans. You know, they're frisky against the Panthers on Thursday night. They get destroyed by the Bills. They're weirdly frisky against the Patriots. Then they get kind of beat up by the Colts, even though it's not quite as bad as it was against the Bills. So overall, though, I mean, I think Brandon Cooks is I do think I'm viewing him as more of a boom bust type of guy than we were early in the year, even if the volume is still there, because Davis Mills is the quarterback. And, you know, you look at the Cardinals defense, the one thing they're doing well is rushing the passer. Even when Chandler Jones wasn't there last week against the Browns, and I know the Browns were beat up on the offensive line, the Texans are talent poor and beat up on the offensive line. So this could be a risky situation for Brandon Cooks, even if the volume is there, even if the price is attractive, just because you know, the pass rush can really get home on Jalen Mills. Marcus Golden, J.J. Watt, those guys are still very good players.
Matt Harmon, everyone.